Welcome back to another episode of the Redemption Podcast. Oh, we have such an exciting guest for you today. Her name is Melissa Methven. She is a mother. She loves the Lord. She is a widow. She is a speaker, an author, a dental hygienist, a breathwork practitioner. She is a woman who can do it all. But mostly, she is here because she has a powerful testimony. Wow, such a powerful testimony. I got the honor of working with her. And the reason we're bringing her on is because she has a love story that turned very dark, unbeknownst to her. And it ended in her husband taking his life and all that unraveled from that. And so we're really piecing apart like what happened, what went wrong, what did she have to face, the mental health issues, the addiction, the suicide crises, how it impacted her and her children, and how God has shown up and turned it all for good in her testimony. So, Melissa, welcome. Thank you for being with
Welcome.
us.
Yeah, thank you. It's such an honor, and especially you as my, therapist for a long time, and you were played such a pivotal part in my healing and where I'm at now. And I hope you know that
Oh,
the
thank you.
work that we did together, the parts work, inner
Mm-hmm.
child, and even the tools you
Mm-hmm.
had given me with my kids at the moment. I remember all these things. I was like, oh, this is going on. And you said,
Yeah.
well, try this. So I just want to send you so much gratitude for that.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I adore you. And it's crazy. I was telling Jessica, like, it's wild because even how we met was absolutely God. So
Yeah.
I want to tell that story really quick because that God has been in your story from start to finish. And even when we met, so I was living in Arizona at the time. And I remember like a week or two before we met, I suddenly kept thinking about Alaska. And I was thinking about Alaska. I was thinking about the people in Alaska. And I was wondering, like, I wonder if people in Alaska get depressed. And I remember at the time, like, I don't know anyone in Alaska. I don't have any family in Alaska. I don't have friends there. There was no reason for me to be thinking about this. I just remember like Alaska was on my mind. And then I started thinking about, I wonder what the suicide rates are in Alaska. And there was a point where I was like, why am I thinking about this? This is so interesting. There's no reason to be thinking about this, right? But I had just been thinking about it for like a week or two. Then I'm at the nail salon getting my nails done, and this beautiful woman comes walking in. You're kind of hard to miss. And your bright smile, and I think you were just getting like a nail fixed. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had broken a nail, like, it's in the middle of it, and it was so painful. And I know it was a really busy Friday, and I was meeting up with actually a dentist, a friend of Scott's. And I said, well, before I'm going to go meet up with him, I need to run in and get that fixed. So I really didn't make an appointment, nothing. I just was running in.
Yeah, yeah. So you come in, and I think you were using the same nail tech that I had. And we end up sitting down next to each other, and you're just so easy to talk to. You have a bright smile. And so we just started talking, and you tell me you're from Alaska. And in that moment, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I've been thinking about Alaska. So then I asked you about depression in Alaska, just because of, there's long months where there's not really any sun. Like there's a lot of darkness. And then there's long months where there's a lot of sun. And you had started telling me, oh, yeah, depression is a really big thing there. And then that's when I said, and do you think suicide rates are high there? I mean, these are weird questions to ask someone that you've never met at the nail salon. And that's when you told me, well, actually, my husband died by suicide. And that was at that point like a year before.
It was actually, gosh, yeah, a year. I think I just had been a year. And when I got full goosebumps by you telling that story, and I know it was God because actually a couple of weeks prior, actually ever since I had moved to Arizona, I was looking for another therapist. I said, okay, I had one via Zoom that the hospital had recommended, and I said, okay, I'm ready for somebody else local that I
Yeah.
can start working with. And I had met one other lady, but it wasn't, for me, especially where I was at, I was definitely guided by God. I had learned to pray on it, and it was very clear when it was a yes.
Uh-huh.
So I had learned to really utilize that tool. So I kept praying and praying on it. And I still remember when I met you, and you tell me you are a therapist and
Uh-huh.
you intertwine faith. I,
Uh-huh.
I still remember I left that appointment calling so many friends going, oh my gosh, when God always plants these these things, even though I know he's there, I'm always so in awe when these things happen and it's so clear. I said, this is the woman I'm supposed to work with.
Uh-huh.
And I was so excited because it was just so clear that you'd be the one to help me process so much grief. And you did, and you truly did. What we did together for over, I think it was over 6 months, and to a year. And it was so pivotal as to where I'm at now. And the whole parts work, visualization. I still remember actually you telling me to write an angry letter to
Uh-huh.
Scott, because there was some anger, and as to leaving us in that way, and my kids, and having to deal with all that on my own, and how powerful that was. So, yeah.
Yeah. You had such intense grief and loss, and that is something that I definitely do with my clients, but I love how God does that, how he brings people together and knows what we need. And so I got the privilege of to start working with you, and you really started sharing your story with me. And so I'd like you to do that here with everybody, is to maybe start from the beginning about how you met Scott, and highlighting kind of what it was like at the beginning before things started to get darker.
Yes, I'd love to. But I was only 23, and at the time I lived in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada, and he was in Alaska. But he had a lot of Canadian friends, and my girlfriend was dating his best friend, and she kept on saying, "You need to meet Scott. You need to meet him." And I kept on going, "I don't like to be matched up, and I'm okay." And but I did meet him, and it was the instant kind of connection. He was 6'4", green eyes, real handsome, and he had just finished dental school. And I was like, wow, he had such a presence, and we had a lot in common as far as common friends, our love for music, and just our community. But I do remember that, again, it wasn't a full yes right away. It was almost everybody else thought this is right for me.
Hmm.
And, I had a lot of friends going, wow, his resume, like checked all the boxes. He was a doctor. He was so generous. He was very loving and caring. But I still remember feeling there was something, and a lot of it is one thing that I couldn't understand is that he hadn't talked to his mom in over 5 years.
Hmm.
And me being so close to my parents, I had a really hard time connecting with that or understanding, because even when I asked, well, what was your upbringing? Like, why? It was never something, major, in my sense. But of course, for him, it was. But for me, I was like, well, still, it seems like something you can work it out, and, but that was probably my first, kind of red flag, is what you can call it, as to the avoidance, instead of actually, okay, I'm going to go get some therapy. Why am I blocked there? How can I work this relationship out? It was more of like, I'm just going to shut her out of my life, and and that's going to be okay. There was obviously a lot of pain. His parents had divorced when he was 18. And I think that he felt like an abandonment. Mom left, but he didn't understand the full story. And I think that was probably one of the red flag. And then, I would come up and visit him a lot in Alaska. I would go back and forth. he'd come to Vancouver. I had moved to Vancouver at this point, British Columbia as well. And it was going really well. But again, there was that little intuition. I was almost doing it just because everybody else was saying, this is the perfect man for me, you know? But if I'm going to be completely honest, I think from the beginning, I wasn't following what I was feeling, you know?
Wow. And what
And
was that?
I was just feeling like I could tell there was a connection. I was yearning for his love. You know, he was interested, but it wasn't that, you know, that connection where he adored me and this and that. It was almost, I was doing the same pattern with my father growing up, you know, where he was at as a young, when he was so young having me, you know, he was emotionally detached. I mean, I have a beautiful relationship with my dad. He's a fantastic man. And actually since, you know, all of this, we've been able to even connect more and see where he was at that age, you know, at 20. And that could be a whole other podcast. But I yearned for my father's love as a young girl, and he was emotionally detached. So for me, that was uh, what I was a safe in, you know, and
It's familiar.
it's familiar. Yes, familiar.
Yes.
And so I feel that's what I was doing with Scott, and really
Wow.
trying and trying. The more I tried, I was really seeking that true connection, but it wasn't there, you
Mm.
know,
Yes.
and so as we progressed in our relationship, I
Well,
remember,
Melissa, hold on.
yes,
I want to
yeah,
just highlight something that's really important there. A couple things. You had mentioned that the fact that he was kind of estranged from his mom and wasn't doing anything about it, that he felt really abandoned but hadn't done anything about it, which is very common. A lot of people have family wounds and they don't do anything about it. But what I love about you is you recognize the power in doing something about it and getting help, because those wounds don't just go away if unaddressed. They kind of fester and then they unconsciously control us. So you recognize that right away. But then, secondly, and I don't know if you recognize this in the moment, but you were, and this is what we do as humans, is we unconsciously recreate the relationship we had with our mother or our father. We create it with a partner. So even though Scott wasn't like doing backflips over you and wasn't like over the moon for you, which he should have been, frankly, um, you are worthy of that. Uh, your yearning for his love was something that was so familiar because you had that with your dad. And it sounds like you could feel that, but it felt like he was the right pick on paper.
yes, yes. I had so many friends going, oh, you know, you'd be so set. This is perfect. And I did love, you know, his family, and we had common friends. So it just seemed just perfect on paper, you know, even though in my knowing. And, you know, even when I'd go visit, there was some other red flags where he had started as a dentist, and the introduction of Percocets was early on for back pain. And I remember seeing them, and even at one point offering me, you know, so I was like, well, I'm not not in pain, you know, but those are all little red flags where those were introduced early on as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And the more that you know, I just kept on suppressing that, you
Mhm.
know, not wanting to see it.
Mhm.
I I second guessed even his heavy drinking over the weekends, you know, to a point where he can't stop, you know? And it was, okay, I'm going to not drink the whole week, but here comes the weekend, and I'm just going to drink so heavily. And then by Sunday, I'm sleeping all day. You know, there was
Mhm.
this pattern. But again, I just suppress more suppression. So there were definitely signs early on, but I chose to not see those myself. Even to a point, I feel now God was keep showing me signs. For example, I was a flight attendant in my early 20s, and was going to college at the same time. But one point, because I was traveling back and forth from Canada to the US, at some point the customs agents see how much you're traveling back and forth, and you're only allowed a certain amount of time. And I actually got stopped at the airport in Vancouver and got escorted back. I felt like a criminal. But here I am, just young 20s. And they're like, well, why are you going back and forth? I'm like, oh, I'm just visiting a boyfriend. And they said, well, if you have intent to live there, you need the right visas and you can no longer come in the US and until you have the right visas. I said, and I was bawling. I remember calling him and he thought something terrible like had it happen, but I was literally put under oath, escorted out of the airport like I was a criminal. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm a flight attendant. I have to be able to cross borders and all this stuff. But it created this big red flag. So at customs all the time, I had to wait long lineups during work. And anyways, so these were all these little pivotal signs. Even when I went back to dental hygiene school, I was offered a fantastic job with a great dentist in Kelowna, British Columbia. And again, God opened these doors for me to say, come back to Canada and start working there. And I said, no, I didn't take it, even though it was like everything I always wanted. It was a beautiful office. And I just really wasn't listening to those little whispers and my own truth. What I've learned, with my book, writing my book, The Truth Behind the Smiles. I wasn't living what my God was sending me all these messages and I wasn't listening. And so, of course, I'm staying with my husband. I had moved now to Alaska, and it wasn't easy because I was Canadian and we weren't going to get married just to get a visa. So I applied for a student visa so I can live in the States because dental hygiene under the NAFTA wasn't under the NAFTA agreement. I couldn't get a visa to work up there. So I went for a student visa. So I kept on really pushing to be there whenever there was always roadblocks. I'd find a way, you
It
know.
almost it almost sounds like you had like this external pressure of everybody else around you telling you that like, hey, he's so good on paper, but behind closed doors you were seeing more than, outsiders, and also internally you were feeling these things. But I think also as women we're pressured to find our person, get married young so that we can start that life. And when other people are telling you, hey, like this person is perfect for you, or we think that this person would be so good for you, it's like we as women, we start, even though we feel these things or see these things, we're like, maybe I'm just not seeing everything that they see. Maybe if I keep going on I'll see something better, or like the potential of someone.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you had to think where I was at in my early 20s too, my self-love, my confidence wasn't there. So I thought, well, I can't get anybody better than this on paper. Everybody loves him. He's charismatic, generous, successful, and I can be, financially secure, to be honest, and which is obviously something a lot of women want, right? That security and so I thought, okay, well, I got to make it work, and this is it. And we didn't get married for about 8 years of being together, and I then we had kids. But even I do remember our wedding. I was the most happiest woman. I'm like, oh, finally, this is happening, and because I really wanted kids, and uh, you just could tell. I could tell, if I'm going to be honest now, that this wasn't the one, you
Oh, you
know.
knew that. You knew that going into your marriage. You could
Going
feel
in,
that.
I could feel it. I didn't want to believe it. We kind of suppressed that. I didn't want to believe it. But if I'm going to be honest now and looking back, yes, I think we both knew, right? But yeah, we both knew, but still go through it because, okay, well, I'm 32 now and I want kids. And you just kind of go through the motions. And at that point, his back pain just escalated. He had bought his own practice, worked 6 days a week, which dentistry is such a backbreaking job, and as well as taking on the business. And so it was all very consuming for him. The opioids, the pain meds starting becoming more and more prevalent, combination of them, muscle relaxers. I mean, it just escalated and the drinking escalated. He was very proud of not drinking during the week when he worked, but that quickly changed as, we had children. And as more things arise, I always find interesting, God will keep bringing things into your life, similar things. Like, for example, for him was the abandonment. Well, he had a falling out partnership and there was a lawsuit. So again, there was this abandonment, he felt hurt. And God keeps showing up these same stories to see how you're going to handle them, if you're going to handle them differently. Mm-hmm. And these things kept showing up for him. So he had this lawsuit, this partnership that didn't work. And again, he fought so hard to be right instead of letting God, mm-hmm. Handle it, letting it go, giving it away to God. Mm-hmm. And I have to kind of backtrack a little as well, because I'm so comfortable, obviously, with my faith right now and talking about God very openly. But in my early 20s, I was not. Yeah. I had grown up with my mom talking about God and faith, and I had gone to a Catholic private school. But there was things in school, high school, that didn't align with me. It was very confusing at that point. I felt like, well, they're kind of two-faced, what they're saying and what I'm seeing them do. And it was a bit of confusing time. And so I fell out of going to church, and I didn't have a lot of friends that talked about God at that point. And when I met Scott, he was not raised with any faith background either. So we didn't have God in our relationship.
And that's really important, mm-hmm. because we have you feeling this intuition, that this feeling that this is not your person, and there's things showing you like it looks like it should be your person, but your gut is telling you no. Mm-hmm. And on top of it, God wasn't guiding you. God hadn't given you the green light on this marriage, right? And Scott didn't have God in his life, it sounds like. And so did that impact your relationship with the Lord?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It did, because it wasn't something we, talked about or went to church. And it was actually until I had children, and I go back to my upbringing going, and of course my mom, at this point we talk more about God, and I was like, gosh, I really want that foundation for our children. And I remember telling Scott, I said, actually in the community that I lived in Wasilla, all my friends were going to church. And I was like, I want to start going with my friends and going back. And I still remember the first time walking back in a church, and I was so consumed with like tears, almost like it's like coming home, mm-hmm. And I felt really almost that guilt, that shame that I had been there. Like I've missed it. I've craved it. And it felt right. But oftentimes that guilt was there too, because Scott was working 6 days a week. Sundays were his only days off. So I felt I was taking away from, the mornings together and whatnot, as he would not join us. I still remember my daughter, who was like 3, 4, 5. She'd ask Dad, hey, come with us, and he'd always say no. Mm-hmm. And I tried to explain to him that, oh, it's so different now, at church, the beautiful, like the music, the band. And he was so talented at playing the guitar that I even said, I had a friend playing there at worship, and she's like, you'd be great. Come and play the guitar, at least for him to just do that, and he'd say no. So at least he was open with me teaching the kids, and became more and more a foundation for me. And I'm so grateful and that's when I think I started listening more and more to that intuition, as I saw him go through the litigation. Mm-hmm. God was telling me to use my voice and say, I truly feel that if we let this litigation go, if we just pay the money and just be done with it, I see so much joy. Mm-hmm. And I also felt if we moved from Alaska, I said, I feel if we sell the business and you become an associate and we move, because I did feel for him, especially, and a lot of people in Alaska, once come November, his mood would shift. The depression would shift. We go through so much shorter days in Alaska. It's not completely 24 hours of no daylight where we live in Wasilla, but it's definitely very short days. For example, 9:30 a.m. is sunrise. Sunset starts at 3:30. Wow. And that's our work hours, right? So we're at work, we're inside during that time. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to get that energy. And I would really notice it when we'd fly to Maui, because his dad had a place there. We had owned a condo there with his brother. And we would go there often. And I would notice the shift that would happen in all of us. Wow. We'd be so sick come, all the time, because we're not getting the vitamin D. We're not getting all that light. The minute we went to Maui, our energy was up. Our immune system was so much stronger. And I'd see a big shift and I'm like, oh gosh, well, why are we not doing the opposite? Living somewhere and we can come visit Alaska, do all the things that we love there, like the fishing, hiking, but do the opposite. So I really started to see that shift for him. And I would see it at our dental office as well. People that couldn't leave because, you have to always fly out of Alaska to go get some sun. People that couldn't leave, it was so tough come January for them, the morale and the motivation to even move, to get outdoors. So in the too much daylight as well, I think it just really wreaks havoc on your circadian rhythm, which is key for mental health, as you know. And I remember having insomnia the first year that I was there for summer. So I started seeing a big dip for him as well. And once I had my daughter, I remember there was almost for him again an abandonment trigger. Once I held my daughter and I was so happy, and it was almost like he's losing me as one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks after, because I had an emergency C-section and she came 3 weeks early. So he's attending to me, but it was almost like he had to pivot that. That's really the way I feel it, as strange as that is. He woke up one morning, tried to tie his shoes, and then he was out. His back was out for a month. Couldn't get up. And wow. And then I'm driving him to appointments for pain management and PT. But then what happened, he was getting two doctors, because a lot of doctors, they have doctor friends, and they were prescribing him so much medication, like pain medication. And I remember he was drinking with it because he was so much in fear, because everything he's worked for, having the beautiful home, the dental office, his identity. Now he's like, I'm going to lose that. He was very much in fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah. So I want to highlight some things you're saying, because just the spiritual side of it, God's design for man and woman is that a woman would be a man's helpmate. And I see that, like, the Holy Spirit is often called our helper, our comforter. So that job is not taken lightly. I think even though you maybe weren't as close to God as you are now, the Lord was still speaking to you. He was still, because you still had a connection with him. And it's like you were getting the idea, we need to move. We need to say no to the lawsuit. Because that was what, 8 years in the lawsuit?
Yeah, 7 years.
Yes. 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like the Lord was trying to work through you, but Scott wasn't available for that. Right. And so spiritually, you had tried to bring him to the Lord. You had tried to give him wise counsel as his wife, be his helpmate, and he wasn't receiving it from you. Right. But then also psychologically, he was spiraling with the opiates and the drinking, and there were other things going on with him behaviorally.
Oh, yeah. I had always a hard time talking about this, but really he had a porn addiction as well. And that was really hard for me to voice that, every time for podcasting or even in my book, I didn't really talk about it much. But more than I know, that's so much that the dopamine hits and the darkness, and that his environment was becoming to invite darkness in.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm very much more comfortable to say no. Porn was very much present in his life and something that he would just numb out on, and so
So that
that
was
really,
almost like a coping. Like he was going to his pain pills because of his back. He was going to alcohol. He was going to porn. And I think he was doing other things.
yes, yeah, he was, there was affairs, there was, and for me, it was almost keeping me small. Like if I was really hard for me to talk about even mental abuse because, it wasn't physical abuse, but that's where I think that line gets really confusing for people and they think they're going crazy because it's not physical. But there was a control of keeping me there because he was probably afraid that I leave at this point. And so financially, he was trying to keep me from not having anything to be able to leave. And it became this, and at times he had changed so much. I didn't recognize him. I was almost in fear as well. He was buying many guns and Alaska, guns. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying it became as to why are we buying so many and what is going on. I think there was some paranoia happening. So for me, I was getting really anxious as to why is this happening, and
Can
so
you
yeah.
can you speak to that, Melissa, for a woman who might be in a situation where she's seeing things getting darker, there's more paranoia. When you talk about this control, keeping you small, can you just give examples of like what are the signs? Like how would someone know what you're talking about there?
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. Keeping me small was all of a sudden the control of him because I was a dental hygienist. I did work there, but he was the primary bread giver, and took care of our family. But he started reducing the amount of control that I was not on the accounts, financial accounts. So it was more of an allowance, but the allowance started getting smaller and smaller, or sometimes I wouldn't get one. And especially if I worked, he's like, well, you're working now, but I'd still have to pay for groceries and this and that. So that control of the financial came into play. As far as keeping me small was, not when I come up with ideas or when I'm wanting to do something, it's like, well, he's not helping me rise, and so it's not the compliments, not where the women need to feel supported in their dreams as well. So I think that was a big one. And so I think that control right there was uh, mental and emotional. Also, when I'd feel like there was affairs, I'd be told, "Well, I'm crazy," and no, and so it's just plays with
Gaslight.
your mind. Yes, yes, and so I start going, and everybody else around don't see him in that light. So I'm thinking I'm the only one that's going crazy. That I'm in the wrong, or maybe I'm not being a good wife. Maybe I need to do more. And I remember finding a counselor in Anchorage and going, okay, if he doesn't want to go, because he never, ever wanted to go see any type of therapist, he'd always say, oh, we'll buy books and read the books. But I remember the stack of books just stayed on the shelf there and that was it. But I remember finding helplines that I said, well, you can just do it from home. Or I had found this in California. It's it was kind of a retreat where there's only 6 people that go, and it would become kind of just a healing for a while. I mean, it was a rehab center. I was trying not to call it that, but a lot of times he'd be like, no, well, I'm not one of those people. I'm not an addict. I'm not this. But I had found this facility that were primarily doctors going there. And but he just also wouldn't remove the veil. because he wanted to be that Superman. And for me, oh gosh, if I look back, I felt so much anxiety that before he'd arrive from work, sometimes I'd have a glass of wine, to be in his presence caused so much anxiety. And I had thought about leaving, but then it's like, look, how expensive is accommodation for women that decide they want to leave and look for a 1 bedroom, or they have kids, so you want a 2 bedroom at least. It's really expensive. And if you go out on your own and you have to completely financially rebuild yourself, you're kind of wondering, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Right? How am I going to feed my children? I'm going to, so you start thinking about that. And then you start thinking about, for me, in the courts would have given 50-50, custody. That alone gave me anxiety that my kids would be with him for that week, because I knew he couldn't even take care of himself. How I was going to take care of, and my kids were young, because when he passed, Mateus was 6, Sophia was 8 years old. So this is, when the kids were really young, from the day that Sophia was born. I mean, there was quite a bit of an addiction there. And so for
And
me,
you
I
had
felt,
said there was a lot of darkness that you felt
yes. Oh, yes.
with him.
Yeah.
Can you share, what does that mean?
Yes. Well, at this point, I think after I had Sophia, because he, his back pain, he had decided to go in the guest room and just sleep there because he had a hard time sleeping and staying up all night. And I was taking care of Sophia and up all night. So he had created his own room there. And I still remember every time I'd go into that room, that presence was so dark. I almost, to the point where I couldn't, God was some days I'm like, I probably should go lay down beside him, but it was keeping me away. There was this presence and then this darkness. And I know I felt that very strongly the morning that he took his life, because the day before we had the most beautiful day. We were in Maui. We were snorkeling with friends. He looked happy. There was hope. We were holding hands. I mean, the last words for me that day was, when we go home, let's read a chapter a day of these, marriage books. And I said, yeah, and even my kids said, wow, Dad looks so happy. He did not like the beach, but he was on the beach snorkeling all day, and he was talking to everyone and having fun. But the next morning when I woke up, I felt that darkness that you're talking about was there and very much present. And that scared me. And I know, especially my son, he was scared of that darkness too. Because sometimes he would tell me, Mom, I don't want to go in that room. I don't want to go lay down beside Dad. And actually he felt the guilt once his dad passing. Oh gosh, I didn't want to go there, and I didn't love Dad enough. But I said, no, you felt the same darkness I did, and God was protecting you, and and from me, now that I have my own podcast and I've been surrounded by people that share their stories of suicide themselves and suicide ideation, I've come to realize that a lot of them say that it wasn't them telling them to pick up the gun. It wasn't them saying to do this. There were voices, there were visions, so it kind of reaffirms what I felt,
Yeah. Yeah, that you felt the spiritual aspects of depression, of mental health, which, as a psychologist, I didn't know all about that when I started training. I wasn't taught anything about the spiritual aspects of the struggles that people go through. But in my faith, and I know Jessica can agree, we've realized there is a spiritual realm, and that this darkness, there are demons, and these demons can inhabit people when we have open doors to them. Porn is an open door to the demonic. Infidelity is an open door to the demonic, because marriage is a covenant. It's a covenant that we enter into. So when we open it to somebody else, we are opening it up to them, all their baggage, all their stuff, and it's an open door. And so you guys were vulnerable because Scott, the leader of the house, didn't have God and he wouldn't get help, which left you incredibly vulnerable. And you had the Lord. But we know that when your partner, when it's called unequally yoked, when we have a partner who doesn't have the Lord, it makes it incredibly hard to foster and thrive in our faith, because when you are yoked with your partner, you're one flesh. So everything he was going through, you felt that. You were going through it with him, right? And he did not have the Lord. So you were particularly vulnerable at this time. I remember you even said like something happened to your throat. Like what was happening to you through all of this?
Oh, yes. The more I suppressed, and I started getting ill. So not using my voice, it started in the gut. Even though I've always been really active, I've always eaten really well and pride myself on it. But all of a sudden, I can only drink bone broth and eat crackers. And I'm seeing an ENT and asking him, what is happening? What is going on? And he said, well, you have GERD. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. I eat really well. I exercise. So emotional trauma and suppression really affects your gut and your overall health. And that's where it started. And then that same year, it started where I sounded like a smoker. And then so I go see a second opinion ENT in Anchorage, and they do an endoscope where they take a camera down my throat, and he notices that I have a cyst on my vocal cord. And he said, well, this is why you're sounding. And he even said he had never seen that in Anchorage, but he says he knows that people that are motivational speakers and singers are the ones more prone to this. And I was neither. I was never using my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I was thought, oh, wow. I still even remember my mom saying, God is telling you to use your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go get a surgery to remove the cyst. And I couldn't speak. I couldn't use my voice for at least 3 weeks in my healing. And that I sat with God every day. And to have 2 young children during that time, and I'm still the caretaker. I had to use a whiteboard to write. My daughter could read. My son couldn't read, so I'd use kind of voice activating on my phone just to communicate with him. But then I knew I had to start using my voice. That was God saying, start talking, start telling people what is truly going on in your home life. And I did. I started with friends. I started with family members. I thought if anyone could do something about it was his dad, because they were so close. So I remember when his dad come visit, I'd really sit down with him and say, I'm really worried about Scott. This is what's happening. And even when his dad would come stay with us, Scott would stay in his room the whole time. Oh gosh, his dad is here, and I thought, okay, I was kind of really hoping somebody else would come and help me, and help me create this yearning for him to go get help, and I really felt alone in that battle. But I started talking to more friends, but also because we lived in a small town, he had a dental practice. I didn't want to, tell the whole, and affect his career too. But I started telling my close friends, his family, and trying to get to see if we can do a plan. And because Scott hid it so well, whenever they would address it with him, they're like, oh, he always seemed like he had it together. He was such a great communicator, and he was so good at charismatic and using humor to make people feel like he's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it was a defense mechanism.
It was, yeah. What's that famous comedian? Robert Williams. Yes, it reminds me of that. He would use humor. I'd work with him and really hide behind that veil. And
well, that's the name of your book.
Yes,
the truth
behind the smiles. We were both really good at doing that, and to the point where even though I would talk about it, people were like, well, Scott's fine. He's got a lot on his plate. He's got his business, the lawsuit, his back pain. And Scott was always like, well, once the lawsuit's done, everything's going to be okay. And then when I would have check-ins with him, he's like, I'm okay, I'm just a little bit overwhelmed. So also he wasn't being truthful to all of us, to the depth of the darkness he was in, even though I could feel it. But if the person in front of you, whenever you check in, they're not fully removing that veil, you second guess your gut instinct.
Mm.
You second guess. And I second guessed it. I kept on going, well, because for him, he was very functional. He, depressed person or addict, because he would go to work. We'd go to family functions. He was very functional. And that's where it got really confusing. We'd have really good days where I'm like, oh, he's back, he's okay. And then those good days gave me hope in those dips. I'm like, oh, well, this will pass.
Mm-hmm.
He'll come
Well,
back.
and he wasn't honest with himself, and thus he wasn't honest with you. Like he had a lot of coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms so that he could appear, because he had an identity, like you mentioned earlier, that his identity was as a leader, as a dentist, as a doctor, as a leader of a business. And that identity, the things that were going on behind doors, and this is so common for so many people, it didn't match. Right. So you were living this double life, which is why your body started showing signs of illness, because when we aren't being congruent with God's design for us and who he has us to be, our body gets sick. Our body gives out. We get mental health issues. Right. So he wasn't honest with you. He was gaslighting you about infidelity. So you're never getting the real Scott. You're just seeing the performance, and then you're seeing the suffering, honestly, of him, because he was leading two different lives.
Yeah. And I did a performance too, because I would be, we're okay, we're united. We'd go out in public, it was just, we're this beautiful family,
Yeah.
But so I did the same thing, because for me, from a young age, was you avoid conflict, you don't use your voice. And I had learned that those coping mechanism, that was me, and so to a fault, I had no boundaries. And I know for me, in my kind of healing journey and even using breath work, I still remember one time that God showed me those big letters, huge letters saying boundaries. Like, I do not have any boundaries. With Scott, with my voice, and with my own worth. I didn't put any value in me, in my boundaries. And so that's definitely something I've, worked on and wanted to address, that that's what I'm incorporating a lot in my life right now.
I just kind of want to give a recap to then leading up to the moment of Scott taking his life. But so you are together for 8 years, you get married. During this 8 years plus the early days of marriage, you're starting to see, he has his own business, but he hurts his back. So he starts going to opiates. To then, you're having kind of, he has this control over you of like, he's doing his own thing, but it's like a push and pull type of relationship. And then, you're in Alaska, the circadian rhythm, and you're just kind of noticing and observing, in a sense, like him just, going farther down. Whereas you start by, from a young age, you had a relationship with God. It got distant to, once you two had kids, you wanted to really invite God back into your life because the power and you've had the relationship, where Scott didn't want a relationship. And because of that, he fell with the porn, the infidelity. And, we really get to see how when you don't have God, you don't have such a great role model to show you when you do go through dark times, because again, life is not all about just like, riding on this high. You fall into things that actually lead to more consequences. But then you two have your children. He's distant. You're trying to get closer to God. You seem like you had to, again, put on this face to stay strong, even though behind closed doors, I'm sure it was continually to, drag you down, pull you down. you mentioned a lawsuit, and I know that plays into why you guys were in Maui. So I'd love for you to kind of start there and leading up to the point of, unfortunately, your husband taking his life.
Yes. Yeah. We had gone to Maui, the entire family, because his dad was now terminally ill. And I truly believe his illness of lung cancer and whatnot, he was grieving too what was going on with his sons and really affecting his health. So he was terminally ill. His dying wish was for all of us to go to Maui and just have a last family gathering together. And so we go there. But while we were there in Maui, and Scott was really struggling trying to take care of his dad, and seeing him in his last days, I know emotionally he was having a hard time, but also on that Monday before he passed, we got a call from the lawyers saying we had lost the lawsuit. That was also the same day, that afternoon, that we were driving his dad to the airport because his dad decided he wants to go back home to Oregon and die by his dog, by his bedside, and go back to Oregon. So Scott didn't want to go. So all in one day, he's getting a call from the lawyers saying we have lost. We're now driving his dad, and he doesn't want to get on that flight. I really felt we needed to be on that flight with his whole family, going back to Oregon and be every second by their side. And he didn't want to go. I said, well, okay, this is just too much for him. But as we drop off his dad at the airport, Scott is bawling. I would never, rarely see him cry. And he knows this is his last day with his dad. And it was heart-wrenching to see him in that pain. And I remember driving back to our condo in Maui after that, and I just loving on him and saying, I'm so sorry, this is so hard for him to say his last goodbye. And I know he just had lost the lawsuit as well, but I kept on saying, we're going to be okay, and get whatever you need, and we're going to stay here. I know it's too much to go back to Oregon. And so I felt, okay, he just needs the love. He just needs the care right now. And the next day I said, well, do you want to just, relax inside, and, whatever you need, you let me know. And we did. We just had a relaxing day. But the next day he said, no, let's go snorkeling. We have some friends on the lanai. Let's go meet up with them and let's go snorkeling. I said, oh, are you sure? I was like really surprised that he wanted to do that, but he said yes. I said, okay. So we do go to Lanai, and we have the most beautiful day where we're snorkeling, we're laughing and barbecuing, and truly after that, the next day I wake up and I feel this deep, deep darkness. And he has his phone, and actually the night before, we he didn't sleep because we were just in a 1-bedroom condo with 2 queen size bed. And so I could tell he was up all night, and I was like, what are you doing? He was up all night. So I knew he hadn't slept. And the next morning he's on the phone, and I could tell he's dealing with lawyers, and he's really angry because now we have to pay this money. And I asked him, I said, are you going to go do jiu-jitsu? He had one-on-ones that he'd like to do, and I really liked that for him because that was an outlet. And he says, yes, I'm going to go do 1 hour jiu-jitsu with my trainer. I said, okay, I'll take the kids to the beach while you're there. So I'm getting the kids ready, and I go to the beach. But as I'm sitting on the beach and watching my children play, and they look happy, and in my heart I was like, oh, at least they're having fun, I get this wave, and this wave I know is angel, my God, to say, pick up my phone and call and text my husband. So I pick up my phone and I tell Scott, I love you, and thank you for the beautiful day that we had yesterday, because it really provided me so much hope. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time he cried out for help. The text that he wrote back was, don't come up, send security. And that's all I got. I went in pure panic mode, like not panic, but just, I took it very serious. And I said, don't do anything. I'm coming up right now with the kids. Because I thought, if I say I'm coming up right now and we're only 3 minutes away, that he wouldn't do anything because he knew I'd come in with the kids. So I tell my kids, we need to leave right away. And they did. We were there. If I looked back so often on my phone, how fast we were there. And it was 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes, I remember before I walked into that condo, I did not allow my kids to come in because I felt that seriousness of that text. And I said, you wait in the hallway and don't come in. I mean, they didn't have the key to come in, but I stopped and prayed to God before I walked into that room. I said, please protect me for what I'm about to see. And I did. And I walked in and I did find my husband. And I get emotional even thinking about it right now. It's a vision that haunted me for a really long time. But I walked back out, called 911 right away, and I was shaking, just shaking. And my kids remember that, and they don't know what's going on, and they're just really scared. But I remember with 911 online, I said, I have to go back in there because I know we only had been there within 3 minutes. Said, I'm going to start CPR. I'm going to go in there. And so she says, okay, she's on the other line with me. And she's like, okay, go back in. And I tell again, my kids to just wait out in the hallway, and now I think how traumatic that would have been, not knowing what's happening, what happened to Dad. But I really didn't want them to see Dad this way. And I walked in and start CPR. And I mean, God was on our side because the paramedics, firemen, police all arrived very quickly. And I was told that's very unusual for Maui where we were at, because usually they're coming from Kahului, which is about 45 minutes away. And I guess there was an incident close by and they were there within 5-10 minutes. It wasn't very long. And they took on the CPR, and as they did, I went running to my children. I couldn't wait to be back by their side. I grabbed their hands and went running. I ran to the only person I knew that was still there. And his name is Rodrigo, good family friend, and works at the beach hut where you can rent beach gear. And I remember running to him and telling him what just had happened. And I said, I may need to leave my children to go communicate with them, or I said, I need somebody to stay with the kids because I don't want them to see Dad this way. And he did. He stayed with them. And sometimes I had to go talk to the paramedics as they continued CPR and said there was a heartbeat. They said, oh, he's still breathing. I was like, oh my gosh. I really thought I had saved him. And I thought this is the help he's going to get after this. And I was relieved. I felt relieved, like he's going to be okay. But as they take him to the hospital, I decide to stay with the kids because the hospital is about an hour away. And I said, I'm going to stay with the kids. And they weren't, at this time, it was March 2022. The hospital was still working like it was during COVID time. They weren't allowing children under 12 in the trauma unit. So that's why I had decided not to all go to the hospital together. And so I stayed and said, just communicate with me after all the tests. But unfortunately, later that night, the hospital did call and they had run many tests, and they said he was clinically brain dead. And even though they're keeping him alive with all the machines and still breathing, but he wouldn't never come back the same. They said, let's continue waiting and seeing how, it's going to progress over each day. And so I went in that evening to go see him at the hospital by myself, and my children stayed with my friends. And it was so traumatic just even walking through those doorways of the trauma unit. I remember hyperventilating. And then because they still made you wear the masks, and I couldn't breathe. And the police is talking to me. The police is also saying, I'm under investigation. Like, it was just such a whirlwind because they're like, well, the detective is coming. You're going to be, interviewed and make sure there's no foul play and all these things for something like that happens. And I remember my kids saying, why is the police following us everywhere? It's literally because they have to keep it as a case when something like that happens. And just they have to look at the scene and look at everything. But of course, I've got 911 online as all this progresses, and have my interview and everything's all clear. But these are the things I couldn't believe it, what that I had to deal with. And at the hospital, seeing him like that, it was just so traumatic. It was so hard. And
You're
I
in a
sat
nightmare.
I am. Yeah, I really am. And it was so strange because we're in Maui. Maui is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And here I am running back and forth sometimes to my children where we're at the condo. And I actually remember running on the walking path as I'm running back to my kids to actually some friends from Alaska that were there on vacation. And I run into them on the boardwalk, and I just am panicked and telling them what just happened. They just can't believe it. And everyone's on vacation and happy. I really felt like I was in a terrible nightmare.
Yeah.
Like I was the only one going through this. And it was such a strange feeling. And unfortunately, after 3 days at the hospital, I'd go see him every day. On the third day, they had said, well, maybe today you have to make that decision to remove him off, life support. And I remember I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating, and I just didn't feel comfortable with that because, you just, people come out of comas, people come out, you just never know how God will show up. And I really didn't want to make that decision. And on the day that I drove to the hospital to go visit him, they actually called me and saying he had passed. He had passed. And so he had passed on his own. And I almost had this relief that I didn't have to make that decision.
Right.
And 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 I know when I finally saw him that day when he had passed, everything looked very much different. Like he had, definitely left his body. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I was like,
Did you have
okay.
the kids with you?
No, I did not have the kids with me because again, they weren't allowing kids there.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on my own, and I struggled with that too, because I thought, oh, should I give them one day to come, try and fight for them to come in? But I remember just myself walking through those doors, because it's not just Scott in those rooms, there's other rooms, and this is the trauma unit. And to see dad, everything that he had on, and it just worked out that the kids did not see him. And now that I go back, and we've gone back to Maui, because I really felt called to go back so that we don't avoid, because I'm very much in the healing. We just feel all the feels. We don't avoid anything. How's it going to feel when we do go back? The kids just hold on to that memory of dad when we're snorkeling. And all the beautiful memories that we've had in Maui, they are pretty much born going there all the time. They were pretty spoiled.
Yeah.
They had to get out of Alaska and get some vitamin D. And so they were months old when we'd go there.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that magic, those memories, that's what they hold on to. Yes, they still deal with that day. My son talks about, Mom, you were shaking. You were shaking, and they were waiting in the sirens for a while would really heighten them, because they heard all the sirens and everybody running up to the condo. So those were all very much triggers for them. My son definitely dealt with separation anxiety, because he thought, well, look how quick I lost dad. I don't want to
Yeah.
lose you. And that's still, those are still fears that he, definitely has. And for my daughter, I mean, there's so much pain. I still remember, when I went back to the condo to tell my kids, Dad, because there was always hope. I said, well, Dad is not coming back. And how painful that was for both of them. That pain that as parents, you try and protect your kids so much.
Yes.
And that I couldn't protect them from that. that hurt, stabbed me in the heart just to see their pain. And my daughter saying, I can't handle this, is what she says. She couldn't handle that pain. I remember running to the ocean with both of them in my hands, because after being indoors, because we was like, we don't want to go outside. Everyone's so happy and on vacation. It just felt so strange for us to be out in that, because we're such a different world. But I said, I felt like we needed to go to the ocean, because I feel the ocean is going to be so healing. So I remember being on the beach with both of them. I said, let's run in the ocean. And we run in all together in the ocean, and we go underwater. And in Maui at that time, you can hear the whales singing underneath. And there was this peace that we felt when we were underwater. Like we felt like the whole nightmare, we could be gone for a minute, you know? And we'd go underwater, but I still remember when we popped back out of the water and my son looks at me, he's like, Mom, Dad hurt himself because he lost his dad. But now I lost my dad and I don't want to live. You know, it was just that when he said that, I still get goosebumps. I said, no, this is not the way God wants you to deal with pain. I said, no, you are staying here and we're going to get through this. And honestly, from that day on, I knew I had to do everything in my power for myself, for my healing. So, because I knew if I kept in that fight and flight, I could get really sick. I've seen already the patterns of me with chronic illness, with the environment that I was in. I'm going to have to do a lot of the work. And
Wow.
I also, knowing that both my kids now are not wanting to live, this pain is so hard for them. And they are, both Scott's grandparents died by suicide. I said, I need to do everything in my power to stop that generational curse.
Amen. Amen.
I had to do everything, and it is, and I know it is. Now I've done so much work, and actually I'm in the process of trying to create a child and parent class to really connect in the nervous system. And now that I do, I'm a breathwork facilitator. That's in the works of what I'm doing, because I do feel in schools, we're not taught these tools that our kids really need right now. There's a lot of depression. It gets younger and younger. I'm sure you've, heard that. And now a good friend of mine who's worked at the trauma unit here in Arizona. And she says she gets calls from elementary school. Like that breaks my heart.
Wow.
So I know there's a need for these tools that I've been able to incorporate with my kids. And I'm still learning. I know you've taught us. Actually, just the other day, my kids went to go get the cold rollers that you had recommended.
Ice roller. Yeah.
Ice rollers. I mean, cold plunging has been a big one for us. Red light therapy, breath work, prayer. Actually, this morning, I bless my body with Christ's light every morning, because I know how I need to protect myself. And today coming on, I wanted God to be fully present and use my voice and what needs to be heard,
Amen.
and be so present. And you have to do the work, because I know when I'm off, a little bit, where my regular routines of prayers and truly connecting, I'm not in alignment, and I need to get back and find that balance,
Yeah.
And my son actually saw me and he said, do you want to come with me and do it this morning? And he said, yes. And it's important for them to incorporate those tools for them too, and learn that they're never truly alone. Actually, they've been kind of feeling a little bit lonely these days too, because it's July in Arizona, nobody's around, but I'm here and I still have to work. And so they haven't had a lot of friends to hang out with, and they kind of feeling alone. They miss their friends in Alaska. And last night, I guess he felt really alone. But you know what he told me? My son told me that last night. I got kind of excited. He said at 3:00 in the morning, 3:33, he got woken up. And then he said he had this dream that he's watching Star Wars with his dad. And that's something that they bonded on a lot and watched Star Wars. And I know in my heart that's God saying, you're never truly alone. We're here for you.
Mhm.
And we're never truly alone. And I told him that this morning when he told me about his dream and the time that he got woken up. I said, that's God, because I know when I wrote my first book, I was woken up a lot at those hours
Yeah.
with a lot of things to write in my book,
Mhm.
inspiration. And I know that's, definitely the times where the busyness is quiet, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
that's,
Well, God can speak to us because we're asleep.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so we're a captive audience basically because we're just so busy in the day, we don't make time for the Lord. And so he'll often, when he really wants to start speaking to you, he might wake you up in the middle of the night.
yeah,
Um,
that definitely happened a lot to me. And for a point, I was like, okay, I need my sleep.
yeah.
but, but that happened to me a lot during my first book. And actually, with my second book, too, now I've just learned to be more of, okay, consistent with my
Mhm.
alignment with God as I'm praying into it and to clearly hear.
Yeah. What was something I can't get over and what really struck me about your story, Melissa, was that not only were you faced with losing your husband, who you had built a life with, who you had had children with, but then you had to also be a mother. And you had to be a mother while you're devastated, your heart's broken, you're grieving. You have all these feelings because Scott had all this undone, unfinished business. He had a business he owned. Like he had so much stuff that you were just left with and left to pick up the pieces while also grieving yourself and then being a mom. And this is the part that's just mind blowing to me. So I'm just wondering, can you share a little bit about how God showed up in all of that? How were you able to do that?
I know. I kind of think back to, I'm like, how did I even do that? But that's why I say God. It's all
Yeah.
God gave me that strength, because if I go back, and I know so many people, they were praying for us. So I feel that power of prayer
Mhm.
gave me the strength to get up every day, because I was so overwhelmed. I was consumed now. Okay, I have to make sure that the office stays running. And luckily, our staff, I mean, they're family and they really helped me. There are other dentists that came to work for Scott so we can keep going until I had to hire another dentist to take his place and another hygienist to take mine. And then the lawsuit was still going on. I had to meet with judges. I remember having to do breath work on my way to meet with judges because I was so nervous. This was not used to using my voice this way, but I had to, I let go of the lawsuit. That I knew I had to do. I had to sell several things, but once I told the kids we got to go back to school, so I'd utilize that time they're in school and I'd put myself a daily list, like these small wins. Okay, what's more important right now? Because if I started looking even a week, I would get so overwhelmed. It's too much. So I said, okay, what's more important for tomorrow? And the minute I'd pick up my kids from school, I'd be off my phone, because there's some people I had to connect with. His parents, families, friends asking questions, but I was on. They needed me so much. And actually, some dear friends had created this beautiful calming corner in my room
Mhm.
with cards that had emotions on them. And they also had tools, a toolbox they had given us where they can draw. They had big teddies. We had like the whole setting was so calming that we spent a lot of time there together just to connect, to talk about our feelings and what might help a little bit. I know for my son, he'd use drawing his emotions a lot. He couldn't voice them. So he'd draw, for example, one time he drew a picture of him snorkeling with dad.
Mhm.
That really stuck out to him, that beautiful memory. For Sophia, she's more of a communicator. So her
Mhm.
being heard and talked about, a lot of questions. So with suicide survivors, and if you have kids, your kids will ask you the hardest questions. And as a parent, I was like, I kept on calling I had found a therapist for them, a play therapist. They started right away when we arrived in Alaska. And I kept on messaging her. Okay, this is what they're asking me. How do I answer this? What do I do? And I do know they were very much, for me, to be very real and truthful with my kids and saying, Dad had a brain illness, is what we called, his condition, and a brain illness, and he did hurt himself. And my kids have very much know the word suicide. And as much as they can comprehend, they were 6 and 8 years old, hard to comprehend, but I said it was a brain illness, had nothing to do with you. I mean, they did feel like they could have saved him. Was it my fault? They've gone through that. We still go through that. But those constant reminders that it was his choice and it was due to his brain illness. And they were very aware. I mean, they saw Dad and they know the pharmaceuticals probably played a big role of not thinking clearly. The alcohol, they saw Dad fall down to the floor, 6'4", because he drank too much. And then we're having to ask for help to pick him up. So they would see this, and so kids are pretty intuitive, right? Yeah. And they want the truth. And Sophia's an old soul. So more with her, more information. The more truthful I got with her, the more trust she had with me, and more of our relationship was good. And I'd always check in with counselors and therapists and how to provide the best answers I can for that age. And that was really helpful. And for me, I just took it one day at a time, to be honest. And I think God just kept opening up these doors. Actually, I have so many miracles. I write them in my book because now I get so excited when these miracles keep showing up in my life, even today. I mean, I knew this happened in March. I knew myself staying in our home in Wasilla one more winter, this could be a dark path for me. Mm-hmm. And we're very isolated on 50 acres. All that darkness, I felt, I can't stay there one more winter. Mm-hmm. But I also had people telling me, therapists and whatnot, it's best that I don't do anything for about a year. Mm-hmm. Like, don't make any other drastic moves, because this has been, big. But I was like, I can't stay there and God literally sent somebody walking down our big long driveway and said, are you thinking of selling your home? And this is in May of 2022. I said, yes, but probably not for a year. Mm-hmm. Well, the next day she says, what if I give you an offer and take the house as is? You don't have to do anything, because just putting it on the market seemed overwhelming for me. Trying to fix it all up, because we had been there for over 10 years. Yeah. She says, I'll take it as is, your asking price.
That's an angel.
Yes, that's an angel. And that's as much as I couldn't even comprehend how I was going to do that, because we had so much staff.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how I was going to move, first of all. And I actually remember being so sick. I remember I was vomiting. And I have this contract that they had sent to me from their realtor. And I go, okay, what do I do? And I just remember okay, this feels right. And I sign it. And I said, I don't know. I'm just going to figure it out. And God kept opening doors. I move. After the celebration of life, I decide I need to fly to Arizona. I can't shop for, look for a school online or a house online. I need to feel it.
And you had been feeling called to Arizona already.
Yes. Yeah. That was actually one of my chronic illness. I had a MRI on my breast, and this was before the vocal cord thing. And I had a cyst and other issues that I had to find a specialist. Mm. And I had found one in Scottsdale, Arizona. I had never been there. And that was in 2020. And I had flown here, and I almost had this knowing that I had to be in Arizona. I remember flying home, telling Scott, we need to move to Arizona. I started looking at schools. I started looking at homes. And then I suppressed that dream because I thought I was going crazy again. I was like, because I'm like, my husband's like, I'm not moving to Arizona. And so when he passed, I remembered that feeling about Arizona. I knew absolutely nobody here.
Yeah.
And originally I thought I need to go back to Canada. That makes sense. I'm from there. I have community there. My mom's there, my dad, sisters. So originally I said, yeah, I'm going back to Canada. And I said, nope, I'm going to Arizona. And I flew here. And within 2 days, I really wanted to find a faith-based school. So I find a faith-based school. I find a home. And I go back and said, oh, I found, and just open up the doors. Even the school said they have a 2-3 year waiting list. But when I met with the principal, she, got to hear my story, and she says, your family needs this community, and we did. And she overloaded both classes for my children. And so God kept showing up to make it effortless. I feel like when doors keep opening up, when you're trying to step into the unknown, then it's kind of, for me, reaffirming I'm going the right direction. I mean, even though I was doing that, I was scared. I was so scared. What am I doing? And actually, when I first moved to Arizona and we're staying in an Airbnb because we didn't have possession of a home yet, I was like, what have I done? I have nobody here. I'm by myself.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that for a while. And as the kids starting school, there was so much anger. Driving them to school, they were angry. Why did you take us away from everything? But I just had to trust. I just had to trust what I knew. And what gave me hope is that my mom left Quebec City for a better upbringing, a better life for her at the point. And I was 6 years old and we didn't even know any English. And she moved us to Vancouver. And I was like, well, okay, I turned out all right. you know? So I kept on telling my kids, well, at least we still speak English here. I didn't move you somewhere completely different. But I remember one time bringing the kids to school one morning, and I'm struggling. The kids are struggling. If I've even done the right thing. And God again keeps showing up. This lady literally walks out of her car. She just leaves her car there. She walks out. I still remember this. I have no clue who she is. And she comes and gives me a hug. She said, God told me to come and give this lady a hug. And I couldn't believe it. I went in tears after that. I said, I needed that. I needed that because I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, if I've done the right thing for my family.
And that was
But
him saying you did.
yes, I did. Yeah, I did. And of course, now it's going to be 3 years next year. And look, all the things that has happened, and my kids love where we live. It's the most magical place in Agritopia here in Gilbert, Arizona, where everyone's so loving and caring, and it's safe and it's very family oriented. We walk to the school, and my kids are doing a flourishing. Actually, we have some friends moving from Alaska. We've encouraged other friends to do the same, and they're moving here next week with their 3 kids. And so it's like, this is what I learned. I was just on a documentary series called Writer's Island, and it was all filmed on Ariel Island in British Virgin Islands. And I met the owner, Brittany Turner. She owns this resort. And she shared with me, she named it Ariel because when she bought it, she was, I think, 26, bought this island. She said, I did not have an aerial view as to why God was calling me to buy this island. It's a big investment, and it was a lot. And she says, but I just knew to just trust was God was asking me to do. She's also saved children from sex trafficking from all over the world. And she utilizes this resort to fund everything. So I love that because I didn't have an aerial view as to why God was calling me in Arizona. But now I know I would have never met my publisher, Kira Brinton, to write my book, and because she so believed in me. And that I could write it in 5 days, and divinely written, God really showed up. Give me the words for that. And now I'm writing my second book, and it just who I've been intertwined with here in Arizona to do the work, to continue the growth. Even this morning, I talked to a fellow author. She's this beautiful artist, but that utilizes art as a form to work the inner child. And we're trying to create a children's program, you know, and so it's just, it just gives me so much hope, and hopefully to other people. I really ultimately, my next book is I want to help people declutter completely to hear God, because I've learned that tool to be divinely guided through intuition and to truly hear God. But when we create those environments, you know, that are so toxic, it's kind of dense, that dense energy, and it clouds, you can't hear, it's really hard to hear God and bring in that light from what you're eating. You know, the food has to have light and nutrition. I love, Amber, what you've created, the gardens and what you're growing, and that is right there, has so much of God's light, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Toxin free.
Yes, yes,
Right. That's
yes,
so
yes,
huge. We are being slowly poisoned by the toxins in
yes,
all of our food, the toxins in our products, in our sky, in our cosmetics. And that's just a huge piece that serves to numb us.
yes.
It affects our pineal gland, which is the transmitter that helps us to connect with God, helps us to hear Holy Spirit. So, yeah, there's so much that goes into it, right? Mind, body, spirit, all of that. But I love, Melissa, your story amazes me, and God is moving through you so deeply. I just keep seeing the way He is giving you opportunities, and you continue to say yes. You continue to say yes with what God has for you by writing your first book, The Truth Behind the Smiles, which was all about this story about Scott, all about this. So I just want to encourage, like, I want you to share. We have this book and it's out now, right? Like, it's been
Yes,
out. People
yes.
can
And
buy
I
it.
recorded with my own voice on Audible, because I'm a very much an Audible person when life is so busy, when I'm driving, listening to podcasts or Audible. So I made sure I recorded it with my own voice as well. And so it's on Audible, it's on Amazon as well.
And what is the second book?
I was going to say, does anybody have a physical copy we could quickly
Oh, I
show?
do. Yes, yes. I have one right
I have one, but it's back there.
there. Hold on, I gotta bring it back a little. There you go.
There it is. Beautiful.
Yeah, and then you know, I actually woke up in the middle of the night when I was writing my book with a vision of this picture, and this is our family picture that we use for marketing for a dental office, like postcards and everything, Facebook, and we so look picture perfect, you know, boy and a girl, and look at us, look so happy. But I remember physically, Scott was so checked out during that photo shoot and really numb and not present. And but again, I was like, oh, we gotta, you look perfect, you know, put all the different outfits together and we gotta be picture perfect. And that was really indicative of like the truth behind the smiles. You know, how so many of us are hiding behind a smile because it's so hard to see that truth, to do the work. It is, but trust me, it then allows you to have so much peace and allow joy. Like now I feel like, wow, I feel that peace. I feel more love, feel more joy. It's worth doing all the work and keep showing up for yourself. I think as a parents, we kind of have a hard time taking time for us, but I really knew once I moved to Arizona, I have to find space. I know I remember telling you, I'm like, I feel like I need a lot of space, you know, even with myself and God, and really check in and do the work, invest in a therapy. I mean, when I first met you and you told me how much, you know, at first I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but now I say it was the best investment.
Yeah.
Find a way and God will provide.
Yes.
God will provide.
And what's really powerful, I just want to say for you, Melissa, how far you've come. Just even sharing your story. I know you've been practicing it, but when I first met you, if you don't mind me sharing,
No, you share it away. Now I'm going to
yeah,
open.
you're you have a beautiful smile and it's very big and bright. And your book, The Truth Behind the Smiles, is the perfect name because when I met you, you're telling me this horrible tragedy, but you were smiling and you were just like, I'm fine. I'm good. I just think I should probably work on this. And I remember one of the first things we worked on was you being okay that you didn't have to smile and you didn't have to pretend that things were okay and that you didn't have to come with your bright, smiley self to me because I care about you and I want to know what's really going on back there. And so you starting to learn to connect with and allow the woman, the girl inside of you that had been like broken by these experiences, but that by allowing yourself to work through that, and not just with me, but I've seen you do all these other modalities, that you've been really like, I can feel the integration in you. I can see the strength in you. And I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm beyond proud of your dedication and commitment to yourself and to your children. Like, it's so admirable the way you've shown up for your kids. And a lot of times you would ask me, like, what do I do? Sophia's angry or Mateus is this. And it was just like, your heart is so beautiful, Melissa.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that means so much. Yeah, I remember actually very vividly. It just came up as you're saying that with me asking you I remember because that Sophia, the anger and all that was because she had so many questions and I was kind of working around the answers. She really wanted to know the truth and the truth. And also she had learned behaviors of dad, how to be with me. And for me, they were triggers,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And
Aggression.
yes, aggression. And I remember you helping me process that, like, well, she saw dad treating you like this, so she thinks this is okay.
Yeah.
And so we were able to process so much. So
Yeah.
I always say investing in yourself will be the best thing that you can do, and it's also finding the right therapist, the right counselor, right modality that works for you, because I have gone to see other therapists before, and it's just, you really have to, pray on it and see the right fit. And so, yeah, I'm so glad and honored that I had met you.
Yeah. We want to wrap up with a couple things, right? One is, what would you say to a woman who was in your position, who has found herself in that darkness and she doesn't know how to get out? What would you say to her in
Oh
this time?
gosh, that's a good question. I would say that darkness won't be there forever, but to still allow the light in, start integrating just a few minutes a day, just really connecting with God, be in prayer, and allow that light in and allow that love. A lot of time it's because we're not allowing that love in and make more room for that. And I feel, for me, checking your environment, like the dark entities, the darkness, be very mindful what you're putting in your body, what you're surrounding yourself with, your environment. Because I know for me personally, I knew not to touch alcohol after my husband passed. I was almost afraid of it, that I could use that, you know? And so there's never any judgment, but think of the times when you do drink. It is a depressant. And if you are dealing with something major like I was,
Mm-hmm.
this is not what you want to introduce. So being mindful of your environment and allowing more light in practices, and finding help, taking the time for you, creating that, investing in you, as much as you might be putting a block. Well, this is really expensive. I don't have, there's a way. God will provide. Pray on it, how you can invest in yourself, find a payment plan, get a loan, take that time, because then you will find more of that peace, that connection. And once you start seeing more light in those miracles, that will ignite you to crave more and more, and your faith will grow and grow. And for people that might still not be comfortable with the saying God or allowing God in their heart, I I always say, why are those beliefs there? Those limited beliefs,
Mhm.
and maybe somebody else did that for you, but change that
Mhm.
perspective, because that light, that love from God is truly where you're not going to feel alone,
Yeah.
and it's going to open that door to get you out of that darkness. And that also, that darkness is there because you're ready for growth.
Mhm.
I truly feel there's a new birth of who you are, but you have to go to that bottom. You have
Yeah.
to visit it,
Yeah.
but you can't just, I always say, you can't camp out a tent there,
Yeah.
don't stay there, visit it, and realize, why is it there? What am I not in alignment with? What am I not allowing myself to see?
Yeah.
And step into it, because sometimes we're so scared. I've talked to other women that are in abusive relationships, and it's so scary knowing how they're going to be able to leave on their own with no money.
Yeah.
The how.
Yeah.
But I actually love seeing this process. As one friend, I said, she's got to believe one day at a time, and things that we would never guessed, like lawyers saying they are going to start doing pro bono instead of
Mhm.
charging us.
Yeah.
Somebody saying that they have a house for you, or like, God kept showing up because she was doing the right thing, leaving this
Yeah.
abusive relationship with 5 kids,
Oh.
and doors opened and open, and now she is safe, she's out of that. But that could be scary, taking that first step, and because you really do feel like in a prison, and like you have no choice, but we
Yeah.
really do.
I remember when I was working with you, you were helping women who were in abusive situations, like messaging with them, I was
Yes.
trying to help you help them.
Yes,
Like it
because I'm
was
like, oh my gosh, I'm not a therapist, and why, but as I got more vocal with my story, people on the sideline was sharing them, and that's why I so believe in me continuing this work, because it's like, kind of nudges people, like, oh, I'm in this situation. And as they were writing, they were becoming more clearly that this is abuse. Even, this is
sometimes
not.
you don't know.
Yes,
You
yes,
just
because you're in
don't know.
that fog, that big
Yes.
cloud, that dark, dense cloud. Yeah, and you feel like, oh, I'm not worthy, or they're so down on themselves. They've been so removed from that light a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, beautiful. Well, so we want to end, Melissa. I mean, there's so much that we could talk about here,
Yes.
but I want to respect everybody's time. So we'll just end with, can you share with us what your favorite scripture is and why?
Absolutely. Yes, I love it. So it's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. It's a beautiful reminder that even when life feels uncertain, there's a divine plan filled with hope, purpose, and peace. Now, this is so how I live my life now, and what got me through all of that. I kept on trusting God, and listening and making sure I can hear clearly,
Mhm.
because look where my family's at right now. A lot of people look at my kids and like, wow, they're thriving, they're doing good. We still, this is a forever thing, where we go grief and miss dad. But it's I'm yeah, it's, you got to trust the process. You got to trust God's plan.
Yeah. Such a beautiful scripture. It really, when you feel like you're in chaos or crisis or trauma, that scripture reminds you that God is in all of it. He was with you when you walked in and saw your husband. He's with you on the mountaintop, and he's with you in the valley of the shadow of death. And we have to remember that he's with us, and he can turn all things for good. And although there might have been signs about you and Scott, and although that might not have been God's plan for you, he has certainly redeemed your life through this story and the testimony that you share. And that is a huge part that he does, is he takes our testimony to help heal others, and that's your legacy, which is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, yes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
now I'm just reminded every day, as I keep sharing my stories, just keep impacting. And now I'm including, even my kids. That's been including them and sharing their story and possibly starting their own little podcast just so other kids don't feel alone and yeah, and their grief.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah. So we'll have all your information linked below, like your books as well as your Instagram handle. I mean, I just highly recommend following Melissa on Instagram. You have so much inspiration. The way that you honor Scott now, the way you you do such a good job with your kids of honoring him and doing activities with the kids to honor him in his memory. He is always ever present in that way, and you just do such a beautiful job. So yeah, you're
Thank
doing
you.
good work, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Feel
you,
the love.
Melissa.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. Well, to wrap this up, remember that your past does not define you.
But your redemption refines you.
Love you,
Love you,
gals.
gals.
Bye.